International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola is currently briefing the media on the G20 outcomes. These are the live proceedings from there.
To all media houses that are here, let me first express South Africa's deep appreciation to all the foreign ministers who visited our shores in the past 2 days, and all agencies and invited countries and guest countries and organizations that played a role in our G20. The meeting that we have just had two main purposes: to have a high-level strategic discussion on the global geopolitical environment and its impact on our work, and a reflection on South Africa's G20 presidency's priorities and high-level deliverables. The meeting was opened by His Excellency President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, who inter alia welcomed the foreign ministers and heads of delegations and elaborated on South Africa's priorities. The first G20 foreign ministers meeting under South Africa's presidency on the African continent. Noted that the first G20 foreign ministers meeting under South Africa's presidency was historic, as it was the first G20 foreign ministers meeting on the African continent. Expressed support for the theme of South Africa's presidency of G20, which is solidarity, equality, and sustainability, and its priorities and high-level deliverables, namely strengthening disaster resilience, ensuring debt sustainability for low-income countries, mobilizing finance for a just energy transition, and harnessing critical minerals for inclusive growth and development. In relation to high-level deliverables, Task Force 1, inclusive economic growth, industrialization, employment, and reduced inequality. Task Force 2, food security, and Task Force 3, artificial intelligence, data governance, and innovation for sustainable development. Further, we have proposed the following additional initiatives: review of the work of the G20 at 20, a course of capital review, a broadening compact with Africa 2.0, and an initiative on critical minerals. The South African presidency took note of the fruitful discussions and inputs on the various priorities and high-level deliverables, which will enrich our work as we elaborate in depth on this in the various streams of the work during 2025. We can assure you that all the views expressed by all the foreign ministers will be considered during our work towards the summit in 2025, in November 2025. We also look forward to the active participation and contributions of all delegations throughout the other meetings and the working streams up until we reach the summit in November. Reaffirm the role of the G20 as the premier forum for international economic cooperation and underscore the collective responsibility of the G20 for the effective stewardship of the global economy, fostering the conditions for sustainable, resilient, and inclusive global growth as a critical element of a broader multilateral system. Noted with concern the slow progress being made in the achievement of sustainable development goals of the 2030 agenda. To this end, the meeting stressed on the need for urgent action to accelerate efforts and reaffirm the G20's strong commitment to the SDGs in line with the theme, solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Stressed that the ongoing conflicts across the globe are detrimental to economic development and the attainment of SDGs. The impact of wars on education and health was highlighted as a major concern by some participants. To this end, sustainable investments in conflict prevention and peace building was underscored. Concerning the ongoing conflict and wars in Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, the meeting reiterated that all states must act in a manner consistent with the purpose and principles of the UN Charter. Affirmed that all parties in conflicts must comply with their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Guided by these principles, there was agreement to support all efforts towards a just peace in Ukraine, Palestine, Sudan, the DRC, and other major conflicts across the globe. Recognize the widening geopolitical divisions, which have contributed to fostering a climate of distrust, thus threatening to unravel progress as we have made to address pressing global challenges such as poverty, climate change, pandemics, nuclear proliferation, and armed conflict. Express support for South Africa's proposed working methods on managing the geopolitical issues during its G20 presidency, namely that the G20 Sherpas, ministers of foreign affairs, and the leaders will engage on these matters, and that the working groups will exclusively focus on technical issues. Noted that 2025 will mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations and reaffirmed the commitment to strengthen multilateralism, and that all states must act in a manner consistent with the purposes and the principles of the UN Charter. Underscored the need to reform international systems of global governance, inclusive of the international financial architecture, the multilateral trading system, and the multilateral development banks. Further stressed the need to reform the United Nations to make it fit for purpose and relevant to the current international reality. This includes the Security Council of the UN. Express support to the forthcoming Fourth Financing for Development conference set to take place in Seville, Spain in June 2025, and the 2025 UN Climate Change Conference, COP30, which will convene in November 2025 in Belém, in Brazil. There was support and recognition that African voices need to be heard and elevated in the work of the G20, as well as in finding solutions for addressing world's most pressing global challenges. South Africa noted the requests made by delegates regarding specific information on the operationalization of the task forces, as well as the cost of capital review. Recalled paragraph 84 of the 2024 G20 Rio de Janeiro Leaders Declaration. The G20 leaders made a commitment, and I quote, to evaluate the G20 first full cycle of presidencies under South Africa's presidency, and with full respect to the principles agreed at the Kenny Summit in 2011. Provide recommendations to the second cycle, including a roadmap for future presidencies, close quote. South Africa undertook to present a four-stage roadmap of this proposed G20 review, including a briefing on the proposed approach and survey methodology, which will involve the participation of G20 members, guest countries, and invited stakeholders. The final report will be presented for adoption at the final G20 Sherpa meeting taking place on the 16th to the 19th of November 2025 in Johannesburg, South Africa, here at Nasrec. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. As colleagues can hear, a highly successful first inaugural meeting on the African continent of the G20 for foreign ministers. I'll now open up for questions. And yeah, you have the floor. You raise your hand, I'll give you a number, and then we will proceed in that order. Nelly, Shezi, it's 1, 2, just 2 questions. It's going to be a short press briefing. Okay, there we go. 3. I think let's get the hands up, colleagues. 3, 4, 5. Is that a hand? No, it wasn't. Okay. Okay, those 5 questions in that order. Please remember your numbers. Thank you. Minister and Sherpas, you'll answer from where you are, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Minister Lamola. What does South Africa think about the U.S. holding bilateral talks with Russia on Ukraine? Do you think that this is something that could be...
Can I have that?
Okay, I'll start again. What is South Africa's position on the U.S. holding meetings with Russia? Do you share other countries' concerns that Ukraine is being excluded? Or do you think that this could be productive toward leading to a peaceful resolution?
Number 2. Behind you, Tim.
Oh, yeah, okay. So
Behind
also,
you, Tim.
sorry.
No, there's an order.
Good afternoon, Kosnati Shazi from Power FM News. We understand that the resolutions will be tabled in November in the final G20 Sherpa meeting. But of course, the G20 is not a binding agreement. So how will the South African government ensure that these resolutions are implemented at a global stage? I understand that it depends on the political will of the individual states. So how will we as the South Africa ensure that these resolutions are implemented in Gabon?
I think number 3 was Turkmen. Turkmen.
Turkmen Terzi representing Turkish Minute. Minister, the European Union, the China, Russia, America, all they are increasing their defense budget while they are talking about multilateralism. So as a South Africa, you are the biggest economy in the African continent. And are you going to increase your defense budget and are you going to strengthen SANDF?
Ferial Hafaji, Daily Maverick. May I ask whether you think that the US's effective absence from this first meeting made discussions easier, or did it cast a pall and make it therefore more difficult? And also, could you share some detail on the cost of capital review? Who will lead it and what's its main function, please? Thank you.
Tim.
Hi, yeah, thanks. Tim Cox, also from Reuters. You know, when you said there is support for efforts for a just peace in Ukraine, that obviously sounds positive, but I wondered if you could share us any details about specifics that were agreed. Was there anything more than that very broad statement that was agreed between everyone? Thanks.
They need you to say.
Oh, you need me to repeat?
Oh, no, it's fine. Thank you. Okay, we'll do this DDG and DG, then the minister. How's that? Or you'll answer the relevant questions amongst yourselves.
Maybe I should just do the 2 questions related to peace and Ukraine, because it's not technically just a G20 question, but it also links to our discussions. South Africa has been involved in various peace initiatives. The one is, we call it the Copenhagen peace format. Other people call it the Zelensky peace process, but South Africa has been engaged at a very high level consistently in that process. And in that process, we clearly define what should be the parameters and the key issues that guides that kind of negotiations, which includes the issues that the minister has just spoken about: respect for territorial integrity. You know, those kind of issues were high on the agenda. They also found expression then in the Delhi Leaders Summit and also in the Brazil Leaders Summit of the G20. So South Africa has also been, of course, led by our president on the Africa Peace Initiative, which also put the territorial integrity and sovereignty high on the agenda. And then there was also the Brazil and China initiative, which was launched at the margins of UNGA, where again the UN Charter and sovereignty issues were clearly part of the agenda. In the Zelensky peace process, the Copenhagen format, what we were asking consistently for was that there should immediately be a cessation of hostilities, guided by the key parameters outlined and agreed in terms of the UN Charter, international law. But we also felt that Russia should be brought into the negotiations, and that was for inclusiveness. So we stick to that approach. We still think that any peace negotiation process should be inclusive, and that inclusiveness should then include Ukraine very clearly, and that's the approach that we will continue to take. It's the international law issues, and that if you're going to have anything lasting, then it should include all the parties involved. And that underpins what is meant by a just peace. A just peace essentially just means that you don't recognize unlawful actions, the outcomes of unlawful actions, as part of a peace deal. And I think this is the approach to a just peace, but it's a long discussion. Just peace can take many, many days to define in any peace negotiations. But for us, it's just peace is generally guided by what the principles of the Charter is in terms of, in conflicts like this, issues of territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Ambassador.
Thank you very much. I will respond to the question on the cost of capital. Firstly, to say that there is a very big enthusiasm amongst the G20 members on this issue of the review of the cost of capital as one of the major outcomes of the G20 presidency of South Africa. And this arises from the reality that we are facing today, that many developing countries, a large number of them in the African continent, are suffering under the heavy burden of debt. A number of African countries are actually on the verge of going into debt distress. So the cost of capital, amongst others, will be focusing on the issue of debt, primarily to look into what is it that can be done so that we lower the cost of capital for developing countries. The President, in his address yesterday and in many other meetings, has made the point about the high cost of borrowing for developing countries compared to developed countries. So that is why the cost of capital becomes very important. In terms of the modality, the cost of capital review will be led by a panel. The panel will be chaired by a former finance minister. And then the panel will, of course, be comprised of quite a number of eminent personalities from the African continent primarily, but also from other parts of the world. And they will also receive inputs from G20 members and other stakeholders as they do the work of the review. So we are looking forward to this. And then, of course, we are working very closely with National Treasury. As you know, National Treasury is leading in the finance track. So there will be a collaboration between the Sherpa track that we lead as DECO and National Treasury, which is leading the finance track of the G20 on the work on the cost of capital. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And in addition to that, I will receive eminent former presidents of the African continent, led by President Obasanjo, who will be coming to South Africa for a 2-day meeting on the same issue of the effects of the debt burden to most African continents. So we are hopeful that that will also be a resource for that commission that will be chaired by our former finance minister, and taking it from there through the finance track with obviously our collaboration and support. With regards to the USA, I have repeatedly answered this question that they have not boycotted the South African G20. What has happened is that Mr. Rubio, who is my counterpart from the US, has stated that he will not attend, and you are aware of the reasons that he has stated. But they have still delegated somebody at a particular level to attend. And in this meeting, we had the charge d'affaires from the USA mission or embassy in South Africa, Ms. Dana Brown, who participated on behalf of the USA. So in the G20, we have a troika, and in the troika, we have Brazil as the outgone president of the G20, and the other member of the troika is ourselves as the current chair, and also the incoming chair. So the United States of America participated in that capacity, and they participated throughout and left when all delegates left. So there was no boycott. They were here, they participated, and we appreciate their participation because they are full G20 members. They've got the right to participate, to raise their views, even if they are critical to South Africa or they agree. But they participated, they were here, So there was no boycott of South Africa's first foreign ministers meeting here. We have also noted the tweet from the US Treasury with regards to the one of the finance meeting. We are hopeful that they will also delegate somebody to attend the one of the finance ministers in Cape Town. That will be starting soon, and that one will be led and chaired by our capable finance minister, Mr. Ino Godongwan. With regards to the implementation of the G20 resolutions, as he has said correctly, that indeed it does not have binding resolutions, but it's persuasive to the member states. And throughout its existence, it was formed because of what emerged during the global financial crisis, and its impact was through implementation when member countries took into action and the resolutions from that period to intervene during the global financial crisis, and the world could emerge from that challenge. And throughout the years, it has been a consensus-building platform of the countries that have got a huge GDP, almost 85% of the GDP of the world, and these countries have actioned the outcomes of most of these G20 meetings. And our G20 review at 20 will also show the progress that has been made by the G20, the impact and its outcomes. And that review, we are hopeful to be able to publish it after it has been adopted by the Leaders Summit in November, which will give a clear outcomes in terms of what has been the impact of the G20 in the past 20 years. But there has been implementation. Even ourselves, we do have a number of internal legislations in South Africa that came as a result of them being influenced by the outcomes of the G20 in the past 20 years, and in all our participation in this forum. I think those are the two that were not yet answered.
There's one about the Europe and Middle East, I think, increasing their budget defenses, and are we increasing ours? Yeah.
As any nation, the mandate of the Defense Force is to defend the sovereignty of any nation. It has to have a budget that enables it to perform its mandate. And as you are aware, there's been a number of portfolio committees, even in the budget process, to help alleviate the challenges of our own defense force to be able to carry its mandate of protecting and defending the sovereignty of the Republic of South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Follow-up questions, and then this is the last round, colleagues. Al Jazeera 1, Eyewitness News 2, Jacaranda 3, Reuters 4, Clayson, joking. Network 24 5. Sorry, I don't know your channel. We'll make you number 6 in that order. Al Jazeera.
Minister, the South African president, sorry, thank you. President Ramaphosa apparently spoke to Vladimir Zelensky this morning, had a phone conversation with him, has invited him. It's been confirmed for an official state visit to South Africa. How much was discussed on the sidelines of this G20 about Ukraine? And is South Africa, as in its particular position, seeking to take a role in this embryonic negotiation process that includes Ukraine rather than the unilateral method that the US appears to be using?
Number 2, Eyewitness News. Shoot from there. Shoot. Yeah. Press for time.
Oh, never mind. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. Sidi Madia from Eyewitness News. It is a Russia-Ukraine question. You've kind of been enthusiastic about how great the conversations were. I want to get your sense of where they disagreed. Do you feel that there is an appetite when it comes to the geopolitics and the conflict that is for countries to find one another? Is there an interest to find and understand one another? And whether or not your vision of just peace feels like it will be a more difficult course to travel based on the arguments that emerged I don't want to bring up the US again, but I'm going to. Your sense of the US in this participation, because a lot of what they've been saying is quite narrow. They put America first. All of that to me flies against the spirit of the G20. So the input coming from the US, your sense of what that is versus the collaborative tone that the G20 speaks of. And Minister, just a last one, and it is domestic. As the host country of this meeting, coming to Nasrec, and I can't let this go, but when you come here, you're finally seeing service delivery. That's what South Africans also look to. And they go, only when big countries are coming, VIPs, does it feel like our country then cares to put its best foot forward. There is a question about roads, traffic lights, just maintenance. Just as a minister here, when you see that yourself, what comes to mind? Thank you.
Jacaranda.
Thank you. Minister, my questions are around some of the things you said yesterday on your opening remarks. Firstly, around the theme, if you can confirm for us if there's consensus from member states, and how does this theme align with the current global challenges and the role that South Africa intends to play in shaping discussions at the G20? You also addressed the geo-economic pressures such as the supply chain disruptions and the trade restrictions. How can the G20 foster an environment of mutual resilience and adaptive trade policies, also considering the current geopolitical challenges? Thank you.
I think it's Reuters next.
Thanks. Just wanted to hone in on the detail about the Ukraine discussion. Apart from the conclusion that everyone agrees on that there needs to be a negotiated peace and that peace needs to be just and that Ukraine needs to be involved in the talks that establishes it, was anything else agreed about the Ukraine crisis and what? Could you give us the details of what specifics there was any agreement on between all 20 members? Or if you disagreed, what were the points of disagreement? Thanks.
And the last one, I think, oh yeah, Netwerk 24, yeah. Yeah, Netwerk 24 first and then we end there, yeah.
Raymond from Netwerk 24. I just want to know, the ICC arrest warrant on Vladimir Putin, will he attend the G20 leaders in November? Because I remember there was some issues when South Africa hosted the BRICS in 2023. Thank you.
Pedro Alonso here for the Spanish news agency EFE. Mr. Lamola, is it true that the traditional family photo wasn't taken yesterday because some minister didn't want to appear next to the Russian minister? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let's start there, DG. I think that's a logistical issue that the Sherpas would know, and then we can take the rest, Ambassador. Yeah, so you'll take that one and a couple more others.
So let me start with the last question first. I think the family photo wasn't taken primarily because it's not really one of the key important issues in the foreign ministries, and when there's no time for it, we don't take it. Brazil, as you would recall, did not have a family photo. And we did set it up, the place for it, but when the time ran out, there was no real pressure to have it, so we didn't have it. Yeah, so I'm not sure what other discussions have been taking place, but the very simple answer is that one. I think the other one that you, Suraj, yeah, because you could find that we ran out of time. You know, dinner was supposed to start at 7:30. We really only got there at 9 o'clock last night. On I think the network issue you asked on whether Prime Minister Putin will attend in November, and if you just go back to when we hosted the BRICS summit, President Putin did not attend. The only issue that may have been referred to is asking clarity from the International Court under what is called Article 97 consultations, whether they had completed the arrest warrant process and whether they complied with Article 98 of the statute. And when they confirmed that, we could then confirm him not coming doesn't breach any of our regulations under international customary law. There was a Minister of Justice then, is right here. There was an arrest warrant for President Putin in South Africa. He did not attend. Similarly, we expect all state parties to the Rome Statute to stick to their obligations, given that there's other arrest warrants out for other heads of states. And suddenly they want to invoke Article 98, which they then disagreed with. So luckily our consultations has essentially settled that Article 98 no longer applies in the way that people interpreted it before. All state parties have an obligation to act when an arrest warrant is out and they are requested to act. So I hope that clarifies your question.
Thank you. I'll be very brief on the question on trade. Just to perhaps read what the minister just read earlier, that the meeting underscored the need to reform the international system of global governance, inclusive of the international financial architecture, the multilateral trading system, and multilateral trade development banks. So within the G20, there is a very good appreciation that the current regime of international trade under the WTO is not working optimally. Therefore, there is a need. So there is generally consensus amongst G20 members on the need to reform the WTO and improve the trade system. So on this one, there is not really much division amongst G20 members. And I think between now and November, as we do the work in the various working groups of the G20, this question will be quite topical. And we hope that at the end, when we go to the summit in November, there will be some concrete and workable and implementable policy proposals in this area. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. With regards to the discussion of President Ramaphosa and President Zelensky, if you look into all the multilateral forums that the President has attended in the last year, you will realize that he had engagement with President Zelensky. He had this discussion at the World Economic Forum. He also had the same discussion with President Zelensky at the margins of the UN General Assembly, and that is out in the public. And their discussion with regards to his visit to our country was confirmed in all these engagements. And we look forward to host the discussion, which will obviously deal with a number of issues, geopolitical issues, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and all issues that are relevant, including bilateral issues. The DG has already answered the aspect in relation to the Ukraine peace formula that he has been attending, that our position has been very clear from the onset with that peace formula, that it must be inclusive. We continue to believe that any resolution to any conflict must be inclusive. With regards to this issue also, we also want to remind the media, in case you have forgotten, that this meeting also dealt with the conflicts in Sudan, conflicts in the DRC, and conflicts in most parts of the African continent. So this meeting also spoke, as you will have heard from my reading, that to elevate the challenges that the African continent is facing and attend to those challenges, including challenges on climate change, interventions on financing for development, including in the African continent, financing for climate change and climate resilience. And with regards to all this conflict, the underpinning factor has been the UN Charter, the respect for territorial integrity, the rights of self-determination, and so forth, which has guided all the engagements and the discussions. And with regards to the participation of the US in terms of whether it was narrow in their views and so forth, the meeting is robust. I will not single out any country, but the character and the nature of the meeting, it's a very robust engagement. Extremely robust, and that is what was happening. Countries were making their inputs, and we consolidated into what is the chairman's summary. And the chairman's summary is what I read here, which is now the emerging consensus, which we are going to build on towards the Leaders' Summit in November 2025. So the G20 work by some form of consensus. So after all these robust engagements, we came up with this chairman's summary, which was agreed by all parties. And this includes the theme. There was an agreement, as I've read, and I said it, that there is an agreement and consensus on the theme that has been chosen. And there is a consensus on a number of issues at the principal high level, what I have read. But this is not the end. It's a build-up towards the Leaders' Summit. The declaration will be at the Leaders' Summit in November, which will now be the declaration of South Africa's G20 presidency of 2025. With regards to service delivery, Nazareth, I've heard that you enjoyed yourself the best year, particularly members of the media, because in some of the summits, you sometimes struggle in terms of where you are accommodated, in terms of where you are, and so. And this is, you had a very nice venue today to drink tea and all that. No, I'm still answering the question. So it was very nice for you to come to Nazareth. And on the route to Nazareth, with regards to the emerging challenges, it's a reality in our country. We have got challenges at local government level. And the city of Johannesburg is not an exception. It also has its own service delivery challenges that we believe that the city is attending to. And we engage with the host city, we engage with the host province, and this is not an exception to Gauteng. Throughout the country, there will be meetings of the G20, there will be engagements with all the host cities to do their best to ensure that the event and the venues is as hospitable as possible. And we really want to appreciate the hospitality that was given to us as the host by the city of Johannesburg and by the Gauteng province. And we know that they are committed to attend to the service delivery challenges in the city of Johannesburg. We all know that they are there. Service delivery challenges, as you have mentioned, the road infrastructure, water. It's a well-known issue, and the city of Johannesburg is attending to such issues. And through the intergovernmental platforms, they will be able to report to the South African public how far is their progress in addressing the service delivery challenges that the city of Johannesburg is facing. But as I've said, this is not just a challenge in the city of Johannesburg. It's a challenge that we have as a country on service delivery on the various platforms, including in many local government, in many of our cities. And there is a commitment in all those cities to address them, those challenges, and we will continue to engage them, particularly for us when we host events, that those challenges must be resolved so that all the places are as hospitable as possible for our guests. And I can share it with you that all our guests were very happy. They thanked us for our hospitality. They thanked us for the manner in which we have accommodated them. They also thanked us for everything here in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and in Nazareth in particular. And I also hope that yourself, also as members of the media, you have also appreciated and enjoyed where you have been housed here in the media center, which was also aimed to ensure that your hospitality is good and you can be able to report constructively, independently, and impartially in the best way you can in a proper hospitality. Thank you very much, Crispin.
Thank you very much, Minister. Colleagues, I know I had promised doorstops, but Minister has a pressing bilateral. So may we schedule those other maybe pending medias with Nelson, my colleague. He'll just raise his hand now. And he'll also be issuing our statement that the Minister read out. Thank you.